Hello world, it's me Daniel. You may have observed that I am no longer in my unnatural habitat. I'm back on the East Coast. I am in New Jersey, my wonderful home, or more specifically my dad's home. And, well, I wanted to tell you a story. The story of Daniel and the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad travel day. So I was born here on the East Coast in New Jersey, and every time I come home, well, it's tough because, see, there's an airport where I live in Iowa City. It's called Cedar Rapids, but it's actually an hour from the city, and so I would have to take a shuttle there, and then it's at least a two-leg flight because there's no direct flight from Cedar Rapids to Newark, which is the closest airport here, or to any of the other East Coast airports like LaGuardia or JFK for that matter, so I usually have to go through O'Hare, and when I did that the first time when I was visiting grad schools, it was like $600, and granted I didn't buy the tickets very early, it was short notice, but ugh. So now whenever I want to get back home from Iowa City, I do this thing, I call it planes, trains, and automobiles. I take a bus, like a Greyhound, direct from Iowa City to Chicago, and then I walk a block to the L train and take the blue line straight to O'Hare Airport, and there I can get on a plane, direct flight, straight from O'Hare, usually to Newark. And it sounds kind of confusing and a bit of work, and it is, and it's a full travel day. It's a long day, and not very comfortable seats anywhere along that line until my dad picks me up from Newark, which is the automobiles portion. But it saves me about $400, so... And everything this time was going according to plan. I've done this trip several times before, and it's worked fine. It's worked fine. I stayed up a little too late the previous night because I was trying to get things done before I left, and whatever, so I was tired. But I got my bag packed, so I got into town. I actually took the bus into town because I take the bus into town. I was going to go to the diner in town, but I decided not to stress myself out by, doing the time crunch, and I just decided to get a bagel from my favorite bagel place right across the street, and I went to my office, and I ate it, and then I walked my big fat suitcase and my big fat backpack and my big fat me a few blocks to the bus station. Got to the bus station just before 10. You're supposed to show up a half hour early, so my bus was like 10:35. I got my bag checked. I get on the bus and it's like a 5:15 ride to Chicago. It's like 3 or 4 hours by car, but it's a bus and it stops for stops and lunch and it's slow. So I get to Chicago. Everything's fine. I walk a few blocks to the blue line, get on the blue line, I eat some Cheez-Its that I had packed, and then the announcement comes over the loudspeaker, this generic announcement that says there's no food allowed on the train, and I'm like, I stopped eating already and I'm having a long travel day, so screw you a little bit. And throughout this journey, I'm actually listening because I just bought Daft Punk's Discovery album, and so I'm basically listening to Harder, Faster, Better, Stronger, Harder, Better, Faster, Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger. When all of a sudden I hear this big noise, kind of like... And I look out the window, and big storm. Like big storm. We get these in the Midwest. Like in Iowa City, the thunderstorms sound like hail, and sometimes it's because it is hail. And apparently on my travel day, God hath said unto Chicago, eat shit and die. So there's big thunder and big lightning, and I'm in a giant metal tube, going to the airport on an elevated platform, so, what could go wrong? And it's pouring, and everyone's looking out the window and doing that nervous thing where you're around a bunch of strangers, but you want to feel safe, so they're kind of doing that nervous laughing like, oh boy, oh boy. And in my head I'm going, oh boy, only it wasn't boy. So the blue line takes me right to the airport. I get to the airport, I go through the little turnstile thing, and I look at the big board. By the way, I looked at a lot of big airport boards, a lot of big boards in my travel day this time around, and every time I did it, what popped into my head? They'll see the big board! Anyway, I look at the big board, and like half the flights are canceled and half of them are delayed, and I look at mine, and it's not delayed, it's fine, it's actually fine. And so I'm like, okay, and then I go to the terminal, and I take off all my shit, because that's what you have to do when you go through security. You have to make sure that that your belt isn't a detonator, and that your shoes aren't C4, and that your watch isn't the timer that, they diffuse on 24. I go through security, big fuss, whatever. I putting on my belt and stuff like that. I look at the other big board, and now my flight's delayed 2 hours. Okay, it's only 2 hours, and it looks like the storm is subsiding, so it's fine. For those of you who don't know, it's not necessarily the planes that are stalled by a storm at the airport, because planes are designed to withstand lightning strikes. The lightning travels along the length of it and doesn't really go inside it or unless it's a direct hit to the engines, they're lightning resistant. But the problem is, if there's lightning at the airports, the ground crews can't get out to do maintenance on the plane or to get bags or to do anything because apparently they're little lightning rods running around the tarmac. So there I am, I'm communicating with my friends, I'm communicating with my dad, and I'm communicating with my mom, all separately, and then I'm getting dinner. And at the airport, you just gotta look for the cheapest place. That's what you gotta do. And my flight still hasn't been canceled, but then, it gets progressively delayed and delayed longer and longer because apparently that 1 2-hour lightning storm just bollocksed everything up in the airport. The planes couldn't land and the ground crews couldn't go out and the pilots are timing out. That's another thing. The FAA has regs that a pilot cannot be on duty more than, 8 hours or something, and that doesn't just include flying. You could be sitting in the lounge because of a delayed flight as a pilot, and that could count as on duty, but more than 8 hours on due day, and they time you out. Due day. More than 8 hours on duty, and they time you out, right? So you're done flying. And that could lead to, let's say, a shortage of pilots, especially late at night. So, my flight has been delayed 4 hours. I was supposed to board at 6:30, it's now 10:25, and we're finally getting on the airplane. And keep in mind, at this point, my dad had to go into New York City for a day trip and work, and he was gonna come back to get his car and then pick me up from Newark. But now it's looking like I'm not even gonna be there at a good hour for him, because you figure 10:30 flight, it's a change in time zone, but I get there at 1:30 a.m. and he's got another trip into this city early in the morning tomorrow, and so he's just like, no, don't worry, I'll pick you up, and I'm like, okay. So we get on the plane. It's 10:30, and we're on the plane. Everyone's on the plane except the pilots, because the pilots are coming from another flight that was delayed landing or whatever, and so we're trying to locate them, and we're sitting there for a half hour. We're on the plane, and that is when they cancel the flight. So anyone who's not throwing punches at seat cushions is just seizing right now. We're just like, what? It's just not a good atmosphere. There's just a lot of bad in heads and hearts and souls, and just half the airport is just seething. And then we get off the plane, and we go to where they told us that we could rebook our flights. And the line is long. And rebooking flight lines do not move quickly, because there are people who are trying to be helped and people trying to help them, but they're not being very helpful toward each other because we're pissed off and they're tired, and we're all just like, I want to go home. Well, everyone wants to go home. No one wants to be in the airport. They all just want to be anywhere else. So I'm online and I'm behind these two people, and I found out their names are Graham and Nadia, and they're both very nice people, and we're all separate. We all, so he's on a business trip, she's on a half business, half pleasure trip. It's where, she's going to stay with her mother or whatever, and here I am, just trying to get home for summer vacation. So it's not exactly apples to apples, but we're all just trying to get home. And I start talking to them just to keep myself sane. We're all keeping ourselves sane just by talking to each other and trying to oh, what the hell, oh, what the hell, oh, what the hell. And this lady's like, I'll never fly American again. I'm just like, I think the problem is more O'Hare Airport being in the Midwest and climate change making storms worse. And O'Hare is a hub airport for the entire country. And so once one thing goes wrong, everything goes wrong. I'm trying to maintain my cool, and I'm trying to keep context in mind and be the academic, nice person that I am. But at the same time, my brain's going, we're stuck in Chicago! And so I actually start to get like a little lightheaded. Like I'm just, like my heart's beating faster, and I'm just trying to think of what to do. And to make matters worse, this is what set me off. It's late at night, and I'm sure like everyone's trying to call someone, and so I can't get bars on my phone and actually tell Dad what's happening, or tell Mama, tell anyone what's happening. And like, so I'm cut off, my communication's cut off, and so I'm just like, so I'm standing in line, I'm just starting to go, ooh, and Graham and Audie are like, are you okay? I'm just like, I'm just a little dizzy, and they're just like, here, sit down. I'm like, okay, thank you, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, I have some anxiety issues. This is my first time having a flight canceled, and I'm just, trying to handle it, and they're just like, no, it's fine, it happens to everyone. So they were very nice, and once I can stand again, once my blood pressure levels out, I'm trying to think of a solution. So I'll probably, catch a red eye and maybe take a taxi home so as not to inconvenience Dad, and, I'll sleep in the terminal or whatever. The seats aren't comfortable, but neither are bus seats or plane seats. And I'm also thinking maybe they'll put us in a hotel, but then I'm hearing rumors from like down the line and around that like they don't have any hotels in the area, or if they do, they're all booked. And then I'm hearing rumors that like, oh, the flights to Newark are all gone for the entire morning the next morning, and then the flights to JFK stop in the morning because they're doing some sort of construction or whatever. And it's just, there's just bad news around, and we're all just sort of just like, okay, try to keep calm till we get to the front of the line, and then we'll know the facts, and it'll be okay, and we'll just adapt. That's what we're all saying, and still, at least my brain's still going, Chicago! So I'm standing there in line, I'm trying to think of a plan, and all of a sudden I remember, wait a minute, my friend Mike lives in Chicago. He lives in a suburb called Schaumburg, Illinois. And I'm like, wait a minute, wasn't that kind of far from Chicago? And I'm texting Dad at this point, and he's going, no, wait, it's an hour by train. We thought it was an hour. It's an hour by train. It's only 18 minutes by car. I'm like, wait a minute. And so it's like, by now it's like midnight, and I'm like, frantically, I'm texting Mike on Facebook. I'm like, hey dude, you still up? And I'm just waiting, and it pings back, and he's like, yeah, what's up? I'm like, yes! And I'm like, hey, could I crash on your couch and stay out of your way until I Uber out the next morning and catch a flight tomorrow? And he's just like, yeah. And I'm like, sweet, okay, I have a plan now, and I have a place to stay, and that's awesome. And so, alright, so like by the time I get to the front of the line, I'm much calmer and I'm much happier, and I'm like wishing everyone luck online, and I'm just like trying to keep the unit sane, as we all try to get this last helicopter out of Saigon. Not to minimize Saigon, I'm just saying, like, we're stranded there. Oh, and by the way, I should mention, it takes me an hour to get from where I am on the rebooking line to the front of the line, but I look behind me, and the line is like 3 times longer behind me than it is in front of me. So praying for those poor souls. And I get to the front of the line, we're doing the rebooking thing, and so the thing had automatically rebooked me on a flight at like 1:30 in the afternoon the next day, through Boston, okay, and then on to JFK, not Newark, and granted JFK is like the farthest of those 3 airports from where I actually live, but it's an airport, and they're gonna bring me to it. And I'm like, is it negligible for anywhere else? And they're just like, yeah, it's probably the best plan. And I'm just like, okay, fine, I can do that because I have a place to stay and it'll be okay. And so I can get out the next day. Your bag will follow you on that flight. I'm just like, actually no, can you send that bag to the baggage carousel? Because I really want to keep track of my bag, because I've had a bad travel experience with the family before where they like sent our bags off to somewhere else. So I'm just like, oh good, I'll prevent that. I'll keep track of them. I'll just recheck them in the next day and it'll be fine. Can you send it down to the carousel? The same carousel that they said they were going to send our bags to on the plane? And she's just like, yeah, I think we can do that. And so she's like, all right, I'll be waiting for you in a few minutes, or not a few minutes, but like a few half hours, because, it takes time. So I get my new boarding passes and I'm ready to go, so I get out of line, I'm feeling calmer, I'm actually feeling good, because I'm like, I'm handling this. I'm actually handling this. I'm adapting. I'm good. And I pass the food court, and there are Graham and Nadia, and they've made friends, and I've made friends with them. So I just go over and we chat a bit about what the plans we've made and what we're gonna do. It's nice, It's nice to have, we've bonded through misery, and I love doing that. Not because it's miserable, but because we're bonding. And then a few minutes pass, and I go down to baggage claim, and I'm waiting for my bag, and I'm talking to my mom, and I'm waiting for my bag, and I'm just waiting for my bag, and it's not coming, and I'm just like, okay, if it's not here by 2 a.m., I'm going to talk to the baggage person. So I go to talk to the baggage person, because it's not there by 2 a.m., and I say, look, the rebooker lady upstairs told me to come down here because she could send the bag through, and she's like, those orders don't go through to the baggage people past midnight because they stopped working at midnight, so I don't know why she told you could do that. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, but the bags will follow you on your flight itinerary. I'm like, you're sure? And she says, yes, I'm sure. I say, okay, fine. So I don't have spare clothes to change into when I go to Mike's house, but fine. I can deal with wearing the same clothes 2 days in a row. Whatever. So I go to catch an Uber. As I'm standing there, I chat up another guy while I'm waiting for my Uber to come pick me up, and the Uber comes to pick me up. My trip is going to be like $30 because it's 2:30 a.m. and it's to the airport and it's Chicago, and like, okay, fine, I'll just, whatever. I just want to get to a cushion where I can put my head down and sleep. And maybe to a shower where I can take a rinse. And I get my Uber driver, his name is Jonas, and he's fine, he's cool, and we're like most of the way through the trip, and then I realize that there's something playing very softly on his radio. I'm like, that's Hungry Like the Wolf. It was Hungry Like the Wolf by Duran Duran, and I recognized it, and I'm just like, hey dude, if you want, you can turn up the stereo. And he's like, yeah, sure. And we're listening to Hungry Like the Wolf, and that's fine. And so then it turns into Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow by Fleetwood Mac. I'm like, there might be some Providence involved here. This is a good song for my situation. I like it. It's hopeful, and it's one of my favorite bands. I love Fleetwood Mac. So he drops me off at Mike's house. It's like 3 a.m. or 3:30 a.m. It's just a mess, and so like, I get there, and Mike lets me in, and I'm thanking him profusely, and he's like, so I'm going to go to bed now. I'm like, good choice. And so I take a rinse. He lets me use his shower stuff, so it's an actual shower. It's so lovely to just be clean after a travel day, and so I don't have any pajamas or whatever, but I lay down on the couch, and I'm just thankful to be somewhere. I'm thankful to be somewhere for a night. I even wrote this little travel plan for myself on my phone so that I could remember exactly what to do and in the order to do it the next day, because it was just going to be crazy and I wanted everything to be in order as much as possible. By the way, points for seeing what's at the bottom there. I thought it was cute. So the next morning I leave, I get the Uber, and it turns out he's a grad student and I'm a grad student, so we chat up for a little bit. And I tell him about what happened, and he's just like, oh, that's rough, buddy. And I'm like, yeah, I know it's rough, and I'm still in the middle of it. So he gets me to the airport, and I go to the person at the desk, and I'm saying, like, is the baggage on my flight? And she's giving me this kind of pessimistic, like, I don't know. It would probably be on the next flight to Newark, because that's where you're going to go in the first place. And I'm just like, okay, well, there's not much I can do now. So I go through security again, and then I go to, the terminal, and the flight's on time. I'm like, yay! And I get breakfast, and, it's a bagel and an apple, and it's fine, and so I go on the plane. I went to Northeastern for undergrad, so I know Logan Airport a little bit. So I get to Logan, and I get some lunch, and my flight is being delayed in small increments. And I'm like, don't do this to me. Don't do this to me right now. And again, I'm communicating with my mom the entire time, and she's like, if that flight gets canceled, I'll drive up there and pick you up. I'm like, I have no doubt that you would do that, but let's keep an optimistic attitude. So I finally get on the damn flight. It arrives, and we're fine. Dad's there to pick me up, and I go to baggage claim. Nothing. So my dad was of the opinion that it would be at O'Hare because the last order that was placed, it didn't go through, but I don't know what that means. The last order that was placed was to send my bag to the baggage carousel, and so he thinks it's still in O'Hare. The lady at O'Hare thought it would be at Newark. I'm here at JFK, like, what the hell's going on? There's only like 3 bags from that flight. And they come down, and I'm just like, no. So I go to the baggage assistant, and sure enough, it's at Newark. And I'm so tempted to be like, hey Dad, we're driving to Newark because I really just want my bag. Now my travel day that was supposed to be a full 1 day has now been a full 2 days. I arrived at JFK at like 9:30 at night. And plus I started this on a Wednesday. It is now Thursday. So I thought I would have a few days to cool off. Now I only have 1 day to cool off before I'm hosting my annual or semi-annual movie marathon with my friends from back home on Saturday starting at noon. So I want to have clean clothes, please. So I fill out the form that's going to make Newark deliver the bag to my house, because this is exactly what happened the last fiasco we had with baggage, and so I'll just fill it out. And my dad's going to pick me up, and he does, and we go home, and we have dinner at this 24-hour diner called State Line, which I love a lot. And I go home and go to sleep. They said it would be there in 24 hours. I'm like, that's pretty good. And they said, oh, by the way, call this number if it doesn't show up in the morning. I'm like, okay. And so I wake up at noon, because I'm tired, and it hasn't shown up. So I call it, and it's a robot. And he's like, please state your business. And I'm just like, delayed baggage. And he's just like, what is your number? And I'm like, here's my file number. And he's like, your bag has not yet been located. I'm like, what? The JFK said it was at Newark. And there's no other number listed on that sheet to call to, talk to an organic life form. And so I get the generic American Airlines customer service number. I wait on hold. I swear, throughout all my calls, I probably spent a grand total of an hour on hold. And it was just, with this, distorted, not pop music. And by the way, the customer service line is a robot too. So the way you actually get to talk to an actual person is you get on the phone and the robot asks you, why are you calling our customer service hotline on this fine day? And you say, I'm filing a complaint. And they go, oh, okay. Please hold. And so basically I placed 3 of these phone calls, and each time they're like, yeah, it's at Newark. The robot doesn't know it's at Newark, but we know it's at Newark. And it's only in the third call that I actually bothered to ask, how do you know it's at Newark? Was it swiped on its way out of the plane? Could someone have picked it up by then, or does it mean it's in the cage? And they're like, it's in the cage. I'm like, okay, fine. So it's actually at Newark. Then why aren't you delivering it to me? By the way, I did have to actually buy new clothes so I went to Kohl's, and I actually bought this lovely selection of shorts and geeky tees because, that's how I roll. One of which I'm wearing now. So Friday goes by, it doesn't show up. I'm calling, and they're like, oh, it doesn't look like JFK's order just got through, so I'm gonna write them an email reminding them and asking them why they didn't send it. Yeah, because that's authoritative. And then the next call is like, okay, I'll put it as a priority. And then the next call is like, okay, I'll make it a rush job. By the way, now it's Sunday. I've had my marathon, and it went very well. Thank you for asking. But I still don't have, 90% of my entire wardrobe that exists anywhere on the planet. So by Sunday night, they put in a rush job. I'm just like, there's no guarantee that that's ever going to go through. And so I'm just like, forget, I'm driving to Newark tomorrow morning. So my dad's working out of the house. I have a car. I download Waze because I'd never used it before because, I don't have a car in Iowa City. And this is the first time, by the way, that I've driven in about 6 months. So I'm like, oh yeah, the first thing I want to do is get on a highway and go to Newark Airport because they won't deliver my gosh darn bag to my door like they told me. All right. So I drive down there, going through tolls, paying for parking, knowing, by the way, that I might go down there and my bag might have just then have been sent on the delivery route. And I get there, and I get to the cage, and she's like, do you see it in that pile there? I'm like, no, I don't. And she looks up the call number, or the file number, and what do you know? Sure enough, it was sent on the delivery route that very morning. Could it possibly be that it's cheaper to have the delivery service ship it on a non-weekend day? Oh, maybe. I don't know. But at least it's on its way. Even if I had to drive down to Newark and chase it out of the airport, it is on my... At least it's on its way. So I call Dad in frustration, then I call Mom in frustration because I'm frustrated. And then I go back on the road, and by the way, they can't give me a parking voucher there. That's something I have to submit as an official complaint to Central Baggage or whatever through American Airlines. And by the way, all these separate people are blaming each other for the problem. Customer service is saying, well, maybe Newark's just sitting on their butts. And they're also saying, well, the order from JFK isn't going through. And so I get to Newark and they're just like, yeah, it looks like JFK didn't send their order until this morning. I'm like, yeah, whatever. You guys have been lying and covering your asses all this time. I don't believe you. Just as long as my bag and I meet at some location in the very near future, I will be okay. That seems like a simple task. And so I get back to my house, and the road is closed because they're paving it. What? So that was unpleasant news. So now I'm like, if they turn around, I will be very angry. I won't do anything about it because the NSA is listening. But I'd be very angry. And so my dad and I print out signs that I put actually on the roadblock barrier that say, American Airlines baggage claim, please call my cell when you arrive if the street is still closed, or some shit like that. And sure enough, I'm like changing, like I'm putting those instructions in real time on the delivery site so that they know. And also now, for some reason, they entered in my cell phone number wrong. It's now 202 instead of 201. I'm like, I don't live in Washington, D.C., dumb nuts. And so I'm like frantically trying to fix all this, and finally I get a call, and he's just like, yeah, I'm at the roadblock, and I called your cell, and your bag's here. I'm like, oh, thank you, Jesus. This is my bag. There are many like it, but this one is mine. Notice the separate tag on the zipper. It is a bus ticket from Iowa City to Chicago, just to remind me, it's been a long day. So yeah, I was finally reunited with my bag. And that's all well and good. But this should not have happened. I submitted an email to American Airlines saying, this is what you put me through, and this is all the things you did wrong. And it was an extensive list, by the way. I asked for them to reimburse me for tolls, gas, parking, and my Uber, which amounted to like $60 both ways in Chicago. I thought that was a fair request. I mean, they made me do all that. That email was sent, by the way, on June 20th. It is now July 2nd. Have I heard back from them? So during this whole travel misadventure, obviously what I'm trying to do is find the culprit, right? I'm trying to like explain everything first off, and then I'm trying to find the culprit, like whose fault is this? Because it started with what the insurance company calls an act of God, right? The big-ass lightning storm in Chicago. But everything after that is someone's fault. Because it's just this huge, when a long chain of abuses, it's just this huge step-by-step process of people screwing up. None of them me. I actually think I handled my first travel cluster bleep pretty well, all things considered. I kept my anxiety in check, I was making plans, I was very orderly about it, I was very, very, very patient with basically every system and service along the line that was just screwing with me in return. And because, by the way, of the train of lies and ass covering that went on in American Airlines, I don't know who the culprit is. I was thinking, maybe it's just a thing of O'Hare Airport, and then I was thinking, well, now it's JFK's order not going through, and now it's Newark sitting on their butts, and I was just like, but wait a minute. All of these are American Airlines, including the people who lied to me that said I could pick up to the baggage claim, the people who lied to me and said that my baggage would then follow me on the flight, the people who were lying to me back and forth and saying it's Newark's fault, it's JFK's fault, it's Newark's fault, it's JFK's fault. And it made me think about, like, bad things happen all the time. And there are things that are unexpected that you have to adapt to. And I've certainly become very well acquainted with that principle in this whole adventure. But the thing is, these unexpected events, like I just said, you have to adapt to them. And where your character is really revealed is how you deal, right? How you deal with and how you cope with the unexpected events that happen in life. What is your next move? How do you handle the situation when the situation changes against your will? How do you persevere? How do you progress? How do you proceed? And do you succeed? How, what's the result, and how do you go about getting it? And it made me think, like, I actually did very well, and I learned a bunch of stuff. I learned how to handle a situation like this. And if part of me is like, I'm glad I learned that when I was young, and part of me was like, I want to go home. But all things considered, American Airlines didn't learn a damn thing. I mean, if you're wondering if this video is just concluding in a complete trashing of American Airlines, the answer is yes, but not for the reason you might think. Yes, I'm angry. It was incredibly frustrating and anxiety-producing for me to go through this whole thing, and enormously unsatisfying when I finally got my bag, and I was just like, I made a big show of it, and I was just like, yay, my bag's here, but at the same time, I'm like, it's been a week since I started traveling. It was Tuesday when I started packing, Tuesday night. It was Wednesday when I left, and all the way around back to Monday when my bag is delivered, and then Tuesday when I finally submitted the complaint. And so yeah, like in Chicago there was a bunch of stuff that happened that was probably avoidable in like the macro level, like if the FAA had a different way of enforcing its policy, whatever. There was some macro stuff that could have prevented that. Administratively, but then it was just a bunch of stuff that happened based on, this is the situation, these are the rules, and this is what follows. But then everything from my rebooking onward, where they lost my bag, or they didn't lose it, but they were just keeping it from me. They were holding it hostage, and I can't call the police. Everything that happened then, that's on American Airlines. I'm not saying I'm angry at American Airlines because they screwed up my flight situation, and so you should never use them again. Because I'm sure so many people have so many stories like that about so many airlines that if you listen to all of them, you'd never fly again, which is just kind of not practical for most people. But I'm giving you this as information to use on your next travel, because, this is just a story. It's just an anecdote. It's not necessarily statistically representative, although, based on the rebooking line that I was on, holy crap, that's a decent-sized sample. But as I said, one's character is revealed not when everything is going smoothly, but when things screw up. If you deal with the screw-up and make life better after the screw-up for yourself and everyone else around you, you're a success. If you screw up more and you just completely lose the plot, and you have people covering for each other and just not getting the job done, that is also very useful information. And you should use that, as a consumer, you should use that to maybe push for reform like I'm trying to do. Like I voiced the email like, this is information you should be using too. But as a consumer, you use it to say, maybe this airline at this airport isn't the best choice because they don't know what they're doing when shit hits the fan. So I'm not just throwing a hissy fit because things went wrong. What I'm doing is I am acknowledging and spreading the word that this organization in this scenario was unreliable and they're not being accountable for their actions. Because, I'm just trying to get a simple reimbursement. It's not that much money. It's exactly the monetary amount. The monetary amount of the inconvenience, and they're not getting back to me. They just don't care. They're just not caring. They didn't care to send my bag when it was actually supposed to be sent. Even if it was just a computer glitch where the order didn't go through, fix the glitch! That's an important glitch, don't you think? And we should all keep an open mind for these organizations to change their policies and become more accountable. But I really think that only happens if we acknowledge that they've been unreliable in the present and past, and we hold them publicly accountable for their mistakes. If someone doesn't tell you you're making a mistake, you're going to make it again. So I am issuing this video to the public saying American Airlines screwed me over. And do with that what you will. But mostly, I'm also saying I'm so glad to be home. I've already done and will continue to do so many fun things with my friends while I'm here. I want to thank, even though they will never see this, I want to thank Nadia and Graham for being such good sports with me online and talking me through, and just, my brothers in arms, my brother and sister in arms, my comrades in misery. I want to thank Eric and Anna, who were just fellow travelers that I just for a short time just chatted up. While I was waiting in this 2-day experience. I want to thank both Jonas and Ishmael, my 2 Uber drivers from Chicago. Look them up. They're great sports about, doing, late night drives and also, keeping conversation going, and they're perfectly genial, and you don't necessarily choose an Uber, but they're good. Most of all, I also want to thank Mike Goers, my friend Mike, who was a high school friend, and we've just been kind of keeping sporadic touch over the years, but on my first road trip out to Iowa, we actually stopped and got lunch with him, and this time he was gracious enough to just give me a place to crash. And so, Mike, thank you. We actually did a video toast to him at the marathon because we always invite him because he's actually a filmmaker. So, but thanks again, and you made it just a bit easier for me. In fact, actually a lot easier. It was the eye of the storm. It was literally the eye of the storm of my horrible travel day, or 2 days. So, thanks to everyone who helped me out. American Airlines, get your shit together. And, world, I'll see you tomorrow.